So I want you to imagine something. You wake up, you look out your window, and you see your neighbor, and he is literally hammering a new fence post, maybe 3 feet into your prize-winning flower bed.
Right. Your first instinct is to call the police.
Of course. But here's the thing, and this is the kicker. Whether that neighbor is, heading to jail or just to a civil court hearing, it all depends on a few surprisingly specific rules.
It really does.
Today, we're looking at that exact line where a neighborhood headache becomes an actual police matter.
And we're using a guide on the Philippine Revised Penal Code, specifically Articles 312 and 313, to figure out when a dispute crosses over into a criminal act.
Exactly. Because it's a distinction that I think catches so many people off guard.
Oh, absolutely. The law seems to care less about the what and so much more about the how. A simple act can shift from a civil trespass to a felony based on, well, whether you used a skeleton key or a sledgehammer to get in.
Okay, so let's unpack that, starting with Article 312. This covers the usurpation of real property.
Which is really just a formal way of saying someone takes over land or property rights that aren't theirs.
But here's the one thing you absolutely need to know. For this to be a crime, and I mean a crime, there has to be violence or intimidation involved.
Right. If there's no force, it's generally not a criminal case under this specific article.
And the law is obsessed with the moment of entry.
Yes, the timing rule. The violence has to be your ticket in.
Your ticket in. I like that. So if you just walk onto a lot peacefully, say the owner's away, but then you pull a knife later to stay there when they come back.
That does not qualify. Not as criminal usurpation under Article 312. You might be facing other charges for sure, but not this one.
Wait a second. So the law actually kind of rewards someone for being sneaky.
In a way, yes.
If I wait for you to go on vacation and I just, quietly move into your guest house,
Yeah.
I'm not a criminal under this article.
That's it. Taking property by strategy or stealth, that's the legal term, is a civil liability. The owner can sue you, they can get you out, but you aren't looking at prison time for usurpation. It sounds completely backward, but it shows the legal system is often more worried about preventing an immediate physical brawl than the actual loss of the land itself.
That is a massive distinction. So, okay, the sneaky neighbor gets a court date, but the aggressive neighbor gets a mugshot.
That's a good way to put it.
So what about the fence movers, for my example? That seems to bring us to Article 313, which is all about altering boundaries and landmarks.
Right. Moving or destroying fences, monuments, anything that marks where your land ends and mine begins.
And this is where the rules sort of flip, right?
They flip completely, and this is what's really interesting. In most crimes, a prosecutor has to prove you had an intent to gain. That you were trying to grab extra land or make some money.
Okay.
But for Article 313, that doesn't matter. You could move a boundary marker just to be a jerk, and you're still in the crosshairs.
So even if I move the fence and don't actually use that extra foot of land, maybe I just want to, I don't know, hide my neighbor's view or something. I'm still committing a crime.
Yes, as long as you have what the law calls felonious intent to usurp, which means in plain English, it just means you had the specific goal of messing with someone's property rights. It wasn't an accident, like you bumped the fence with your car. It was a deliberate choice to alter the physical truth of that property line.
So I guess the big takeaway for you, the listener, is that the law seems to prioritize peace and the integrity of records over almost everything else.
That's a perfect summary. Article 312 is the peacekeeper. It punishes force.
And Article 313 is the record keeper. It protects the physical markers of ownership, whether or not someone profits.
It's all about maintaining order. By criminalizing force and the destruction of markers, the law is trying to push people towards a courtroom instead of a backyard brawl. These aren't just fines, they're felonies.
It really does make you realize the law is less about who owns what and more about how you behave. So to wrap this all up, just remember, Article 312 requires violence at the start to be a crime, while Article 313 protects the markers themselves, even if you don't gain a single cent.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to sort of mull over. If the law treats stealth as a civil matter but treats violence as a felony, what does that say about what the legal system is truly trying to protect? Is it your right to the land, or is the law just trying to stamp out the first spark of physical conflict?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this exploration.
Have you ever had that nightmare where a neighbor just decides your backyard is now their backyard? It sounds wild, but land grabbing is a very real thing. Today, we're going to untangle these surprisingly specific laws that deal with it. Okay, let's get right into it. You know, we usually think of property line arguments as a civil thing, right? Something you sue over. But what happens when it's not just a disagreement? What if someone physically takes your land by force? Well, that's when you cross a very important line into criminal law. So, picture this. You get home and your neighbor has just built a new fence a few feet on your lawn. They're basically occupying your land and they're not moving. Your first thought is probably, they're stealing my land. But in the eyes of the law, it's not quite that simple.
The law has a very specific and much more serious word for this: usurpation. And honestly, understanding this one word is the key to knowing your rights when things get this intense.
So what in the world is usurpation? Well, it's not just about taking property, it's all about how that property is taken. Let's break down the legal ingredients for this very specific crime. So here it is, straight from Article 312 of the Revised Penal Code. Now, the two phrases that are absolutely critical here are real property, so we're talking about land, houses, not your phone or your car, and the method, through violence or intimidation. Let's dig into what that actually means. Think of it like a recipe. For the crime of usurpation to actually exist, you have to have all four of these ingredients. You've got to take possession of property that isn't yours, you have to be trying to gain something from it, and, this is the secret sauce, you must use violence or intimidation to pull it off. And that last part, the violence, that's really what separates usurpation from your average property dispute. It's the key that turns a civil problem into a criminal one, because it disturbs the public peace. This chart lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got someone using force or threats to get in. That is usurpation. But on the right, what if they're just sneaky? Like in the famous Dimmock attack case, if they build that fence on your land while you're away on vacation, that's not the crime of usurpation. It's a civil issue, sure, but you'd handle it very differently in court. And this is a super important detail. The law is incredibly picky here. The violence has to be the way they get in. If someone slips onto your land peacefully and then threatens you when you try to make them leave, that's not usurpation. The threat has to be the key they use to open the door, so to speak. It's all these little details that help us tell the difference between usurpation and other terms we hear all the time, like squatting or even theft. So let's compare them side by side. This table makes it pretty clear. You can see theft and robbery are for personal property, things you can actually carry away. Usurpation is strictly for real property, like land. And while squatting can involve force, certain squatting laws are for specific types of land, like public agricultural land. Usurpation, though, can apply to any private real property. So here's the big takeaway. Even if an act doesn't meet that super high standard for the crime of usurpation, you're not out of options. You can still file a civil case. This could be for forcible entry, if they used any force at all, or unlawful detainer, which is for, say, a tenant who just refuses to leave. They're just different legal tools for different jobs. Okay, so we've covered what happens when someone takes over a piece of your land. But what if they don't even occupy it? What if they just move the border a little? Well, believe it or not, that's a completely different crime. Yep, this is Article 313, and the law here is really, really broad. Altering can mean anything from destroying a landmark to moving a boundary stone, or even just taking down a fence that separates two properties. But the truly weird part about this crime is what's missing from the recipe. See, with almost every other property crime out there, the prosecutor has to prove that the person was trying to profit from it, that they had an intent to gain. But not for this one. When it comes to altering boundaries, the amount of intent to gain required by the law is a big fat zero. That's right. For this crime, your reason for doing it is totally irrelevant. The simple act of knowingly moving that boundary marker is the crime. You could be doing it as a joke or just to be mean. The law doesn't care. The act itself is what gets you in trouble. So after all that legal deep diving, what's the one thing you should really walk away with? It's that in property law, the how is every bit as important as the what. Let's just quickly run through the main points. First, usurpation is a crime, but only if violence is used at the exact moment of entry. Second, if someone is sneaky, it's a civil issue, not a criminal one. Third, the law has totally different rules for your land versus your laptop. And finally, just moving a boundary line is a crime all on its own, no matter why you did it. So the huge lesson here is that legal words have very precise meanings. The law doesn't just ask, what did you take? It asks, how did you take it? And what kind of thing was it? The details mean everything. And that's what makes the future of all this so interesting. Think about it. These laws were written for a world of physical, dirt and stone fences. But as we dive deeper into an age of digital money, virtual real estate, and NFTs, it brings up a wild question. How do these old ideas of property even apply? What does it mean to violently occupy a plot of land in the metaverse? That is a puzzle our legal system is just now starting to figure out. Thanks so much for watching.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I have to admit, when I saw the topic for today, I legitimately thought we were going to be talking about Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones? Really?
Yeah, usurpation. It just sounds so, medieval. It sounds like I need a signet ring, a broadsword, and maybe a dragon or two.
I see it, yeah.
I was ready for a history lesson on royal succession and, backstabbing in the court.
Well, there's definitely backstabbing involved in today's topic, but usually less dragons and more land surveys.
Right. I looked at the syllabus you sent over, and I realized, no, this is not about the Iron Throne.
Not even close.
This is about my neighbor moving his fence 3 inches while I'm on vacation.
Yeah.
Or someone squatting in an empty apartment down the hall.
Exactly. It feels less epic on the surface, but I would argue the drama is just as high. I mean, we were talking about people losing their homes, generation-long family feuds.
Oh, yeah.
And the very specific legal difference between stealing a watch and stealing a farm.
And that is a weird distinction when you say it out loud. Stealing a farm.
You can't really do it, can you?
You can't. So let's set the stage for everyone listening. We are digging into Chapter 4 of Crimes Against Property in the Revised Penal Code. Specifically, usurpation.
Articles 312 and 313. That's our focus.
To get us hooked, I want to paint a nightmare scenario, and I want you to tell me if this is a crime.
Okay, go for it. I'm ready.
Okay, picture this. You go on vacation, let's say 2 weeks in Boracay. You come back, you're tanned, you're relaxed, you're dragging your suitcase up the driveway.
Feeling good?
You put your key in the front door of your house, but it doesn't turn.
Ugh, the panic starts setting in immediately.
Exactly. You realize the lock has been changed. You knock, confused, and a stranger opens the door.
Oh.
He's wearing your bathrobe.
My bathrobe.
He's drinking coffee from your favorite mug. And he just looks at you and says, I live here now.
Wow. That is the ultimate violation of personal space.
Right. Now, my instinct, and I assume the instinct of everyone listening, is to scream, police, I've been robbed.
Of course.
I want this guy in handcuffs immediately. But, and this is what we're going to uncover today, strictly speaking, legally speaking, is it robbery? Is it theft?
Right.
Or is it this other thing, usurpation? And does the law treat the guy in the bathrobe differently if he broke the window to get in versus if he just walked in through an unlocked door?
And those distinctions, how they got in, what they are taking, and who they are exactly what defines the line between a civil dispute, which is just a lawsuit, and a criminal act, which puts you behind bars.
It sounds complicated.
And I have to warn you, the answers might make you a little angry.
I'm already angry at the bathrobe guy. So our mission today is to unpack Articles 312 and 313 of the Revised Penal Code, plus a few related special laws. We have a stack of sources here, legal syllabi, statutes, amendments, and some really interesting case law with names like U.S. versus Fuster and People versus Demokatok.
And before we dive in, I think it's important to set the tone. Property law often gets a bad rap for being dry.
It really does. Deeds and titles.
Yeah, it's usually about deeds and titles and notarized documents. But criminal property law, specifically usurpation, is fascinating because it reveals how the law values possession versus ownership.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
It forces us to ask, is it a crime to take what belongs to you? Is it a crime to move a fence? The answers aren't as obvious as you might think.
Is it a crime to take what belongs to you? That sounds like a riddle.
It kind of is.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Section 1. The definition of usurpation under Article 312. The title in the syllabus is Occupation of Real Property or Usurpation of Real Rights in Property.
It's a mouthful, but let's break it down. To understand usurpation, you first have to understand what it is not.
Okay.
It is not robbery and it is not theft.
Okay, distinguish those for us.
Yeah.
Because if someone takes my stuff, it feels like theft regardless of what the stuff is.
That's the common sense view, for sure. But the law is very particular. The key difference lies in the nature of the property.
The nature of it.
Yes. Theft and robbery deal with personal property. These are movable things. Your car, your watch, your wallet, your laptop, even your dog, legally speaking.
Wait.
If I snatch your phone and run, that's theft or robbery, depending on the force used.
Right. Movable objects, things I can carry.
Exactly. The legal term is asportation. the ability to carry it away. You can't have theft without it.
Okay.
Usurpation, specifically under Article 312, deals with real property or real rights. Real property is immovable.
Immovable.
Land, a building, a house, a planted crop that is still attached to the soil. You cannot steal a plot of land in the sense of putting it in your pocket and walking away.
You can't put a farm in your backpack.
Precisely. You can't carry it, so you can't steal it in the traditional sense. You have to occupy it. That's the physical act.
I see.
But, and this is a similarity, in both robbery, theft, and usurpation, the offender must have an intent to gain.
So the motivation is the same. I want this thing that isn't mine, but the object is different. One is a watch, the other is a warehouse.
Correct. Now let's look at the elements of the crime for Article 312, because this is where the legal recipe gets spicy.
Okay, let's hear them.
According to the source, there are 4 elements. First, the offender takes possession of real property or usurps a real right.
Okay, simple enough.
Second, that property belongs to another. Third, there is an intent to gain.
That all sounds standard. Very logical so far.
But the 4th element is the clincher. The 4th element is that violence or intimidation of persons is used.
Okay, stop. Violence or intimidation of persons.
Yeah.
I want to stare at this for a minute because the source material was very specific, almost aggressive about this point.
It's the critical element.
It says in our notes, use of force upon things is not a means for committing this crime. All caps.
That is the single most important distinction in this entire article. It's the whole ballgame.
So let's go back to my nightmare scenario, the bathrobe guy. Suppose he got in by taking a crowbar and absolutely destroying my beautiful mahogany front door. Splinters everywhere. He broke the lock. He smashed the frame. That is violence, right? He used force.
He used force upon things. He broke the door.
But did he touch you? Did he threaten you?
No, I wasn't home. He did it while I was in Boracay.
Then, strictly speaking, under Article 312, he has not committed the crime of usurpation.
Wait, pause. I need to process this. You're telling me I can come home, find my front door completely splintered, my house occupied by a stranger, and because he didn't punch me personally, he hasn't committed the crime of usurpation.
That is exactly what I'm saying, and I can see your blood pressure rising just thinking about it.
It's skyrocketing. How is that possible? He broke into my house. That's breaking and entering, isn't it?
It feels like a massive loophole, doesn't it? But look at it from the drafter's perspective. They are distinguishing between a property crime and a person crime.
The lock is just a thing. The law says, okay, you broke a thing. We have a law for that. It's called malicious mischief. You can charge him for breaking the door.
Malicious mischief.
Yes. But the specific crime of usurpation, which carries its own penalties, is reserved for seizing control through violence against people.
It feels like the law is protecting the squatter here. It's bizarre.
It feels like it, but think of it as a safety valve. The law is trying to prevent every single property dispute from becoming a criminal case.
How so?
Imagine you and I have a dispute over a boundary line. I think the shed is mine, you think it's yours.
Right. A classic neighbor fight.
I break the padlock on the shed to get my lawnmower. Do we want the police to arrest me and throw me in jail for usurpation? Or do we want a judge to look at the deeds and decide who owns the shed?
Okay, I see that. You want the judge involved, not the SWAT team.
Exactly. The law prefers the civil route, unless a fist starts flying. Once I threaten you or hit you, the law says, okay, now you've crossed the line from a property dispute to a breach of the public peace.
That's when the handcuffs come out.
That's when the handcuffs come out. The person's safety trumps the property's integrity, in a sense.
So if bathrobe guy just picked the lock, no damage, no violence, it's definitely not criminal usurpation.
Correct. A purely civil matter of forcible entry.
But if I try to enter and he pulls a knife on me, or even just shoves me back.
Now we have intimidation of persons. Or violence against persons. Now we have usurpation. Now he goes to jail.
That is a razor-thin line with huge consequences. You're basically saying the criminality of the act depends entirely on whether there was a human being standing in the way to get hurt.
Yes. The law prioritizes the safety of the person over the sanctity of the padlock.
Okay, that's a heavy concept to digest. But let's move to the how of the crime, because this gets even trickier.
It does.
We talked about violence. But what about being sneaky? The syllabus cites a case, People versus Democutak.
Yes, People versus Democutak. This case is essential because it introduces the concepts of strategy and stealth.
Strategy and stealth. It sounds like a ninja movie. Tell us the story of this case. What actually happened?
To understand this, we have to look at the narrative. Picture this. You have a piece of land. The owner isn't there. Maybe they're in the city for work, maybe they're abroad.
Common scenario.
But they have a caretaker, or maybe they just check on it on weekends. The accused in this case, let's call him the squatter, sees an opportunity. He doesn't storm the gates. He doesn't bring a private army.
He watches.
He watches, he's casing the joint, as you'd say. He waits for the caretaker to leave, or perhaps he finds a back gate that was left unlatched. This is stealth.
Okay.
Or maybe he tricks the caretaker into leaving. That would be strategy. The point is, he slips in. Quietly, no yelling, no weapons, just walking in.
And when the owner comes back?
The owner comes back and the squatter is settled in. The owner sues for usurpation, and the Supreme Court has to decide. Is being sneaky the same as being violent?
Logic would say it's just a different way of stealing.
But the court said no. In People v. Demakatak, the ruling was clear. If the accused took possession through strategy or stealth, and not violence or intimidation against persons, Article 312 is not violated.
So the ninja approach works.
In terms of avoiding a criminal record for usurpation,
Yeah.
the source explicitly says liability is only civil.
Liability is only civil. That means you can drag them to court to get your land back, you can make them pay for damages, you can evict them.
All of that.
But the state isn't going to treat them as a criminal. The police won't arrest them for that act.
Exactly. It treats it as a private dispute between two parties over who has the better right to be there, rather than a crime against the public order.
But wait, the source also mentioned something about the timing of the violence. This was another nuance in Demakatak and another case, People v. Layson, that really caught my eye.
Yes. The timeline argument. This is where lawyers make their money.
So, scenario. I sneak in on Monday. Stealth mode.
You're in.
I'm in the house. I'm comfortable.
Sure.
Then, on Wednesday, the owner comes back,
Yep.
he tries to get in, and now I punch him in the face to keep him out.
Okay. So violence has occurred. A person has been harmed.
Right. So now it's usurpation, right? Because I used violence.
You would think so, but the court says maybe not.
I punched him.
You did. And you will be charged for that punch. Physical injuries or assault, absolutely. But will you be charged with usurpation?
I don't see why not.
The court in Layson and Demakatak said the violence or intimidation must be the means used to occupy the property.
The means used. So it has to be the tool that gets you in the door.
Exactly. When did you occupy the property? Monday. How did you do it? Stealth. Was there violence?
No.
No, so the Usurpation Act was not criminal under Article 312.
And the Wednesday punch.
That happened after you were already in possession. You were already the occupant. The violence was used to maintain possession, not to take it.
That feels wildly unfair to the owner. Oh, he beat me up, but he beat me up on Wednesday, not Monday, so he's not a usurper. That sounds like a technicality designed to drive me crazy.
I know it sounds counterintuitive. It's frustrating. But you have to separate the timelines in the eyes of the law. The crime of usurpation is the act of taking.
The moment of entry.
Yes. When did the taking happen? Monday? Therefore, the taking wasn't criminal usurpation. The law is hyper-technical about when the crime is consummated.
So just to be clear for the listener who is currently screaming at their device, the guy isn't getting away with punching the owner.
No, absolutely not. Let's be very clear on that. He goes to jail for the punch.
Okay.
But he doesn't get the additional conviction for usurpation. And that matters for things like penalties, fines, and the overall weight of his criminal record.
Okay. I think I understand, even if I don't emotionally agree with it. It's about the anatomy of that specific moment of entry.
Precisely.
Now, let's flip the script entirely. We've been talking about strangers taking your land. What if you own the land?
The U.S. versus Fuster case. This is a classic vigilante owner scenario.
Yeah. So, scenario, I own a farm, I have the title, it's mine. But maybe I leased it to you, or maybe you just started squatting there and you refuse to leave.
Right, a holdover tenant or a squatter?
The lease is up or you never had one.
Yeah.
I get frustrated. I go there with a baseball bat and I physically kick you off my land.
You're taking matters into your own hands.
Can I be charged with usurpation?
Under Article 312, no.
Because it's my land.
Exactly. One of the elements we listed earlier is that the real property belongs to another. You cannot usurp your own property.
It's my castle, my rules.
In U.S. versus Fuster, the defendant showed he was the owner, while the offended party was just a possessor. The court said Article 312 doesn't apply because you can't steal from yourself.
So, I'm in the clear. I can go vigilante on my own tenants. I can just drag them out by the collar.
Absolutely not. And please, listener, do not try this. If you take one thing away from this episode, let it be this. Do not go vigilante.
Why not? If it's not usurpation?
Because there is another crime waiting for you. The source has a very important note from a legal scholar named Reyes. He clarifies that if you use violence or intimidation to take back your own land, the crime is grave coercion.
Grave coercion.
Yeah.
That sounds serious.
It is. Coercion is preventing someone from doing something they have a right to do or compelling them to do something against their will through violence.
But they don't have right to be on my land.
But they have a right to be there until a court says otherwise. They have a right to due process. You can't be the judge, jury, and executioner.
So the law is saying, you have a title. Great. Go to court. Get an eviction order. Call the sheriff. Do not bring a baseball bat.
The law really hates self-help justice. It hates chaos. If everyone with a property deed started physically throwing people out, we'd have anarchy in the streets.
Right. It would be the Wild West.
So while you avoid the specific label of usurper, you still land in hot water for coercion.
It effectively forces you to trust the system even when the system is slow.
Which is a frustration many property owners know all too well.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked about occupying real property like the land itself. But the statute also mentions usurpation of real rights. This feels a bit more abstract.
It is. It's not always about the dirt or the building. It's about the rights attached to that dirt.
Give us some examples. What is a real right?
Think about things like a right of way, the legal right to drive across your neighbor's land to get to the highway. Or usufruct, the right to use someone else's property and enjoy its benefits. Or mining rights, or the right to harvest crops.
Okay, so it's the ability to do something on the land, not just be on it.
Exactly. And you can usurp that, right? Just like you can usurp the house. The source gives us a specific case, People versus Kalea.
Right.
This was about a land dispute that had already gone to court.
So the judge had already ruled this wasn't an open question anymore.
Correct. The judge slammed the gavel and said, this land belongs to the other guy. You have no rights here.
Case closed, you would think.
You'd think. But the accused in Kalasia ignored the ruling. He didn't build a house and live there, but he went onto the land and harvested the products, the crops, the fruits.
So he just took the harvest. Maybe it was coconuts or mangoes.
Whatever it was, he took it. And the court found him guilty of usurpation of real rights.
Why that specific crime?
Because the right to harvest the fruits of the land is a real right attached to the ownership. By taking the products by force or intimidation, or in open defiance of the court, which amounted to intimidation, he usurped that right.
It's interesting because he wasn't squatting in the traditional sense. He was just taking the profit.
And that links back to the intent to gain. He was gaining the economic benefit of the land that didn't belong to him.
Speaking of gain, let's talk about the punishment.
Yeah.
Because this is one area where the law has been updated. And honestly, the penalty structure seems a little weird.
It is unusual.
We have amendments from Republic Act number 10951.
We do. And you're right, it is unique. For Article 312, the penalty is a fine only.
A fine only. No prison. For a crime that we just established requires violence or intimidation.
Not in the penalty clause for the usurpation itself. The fine is calculated based on the gain obtained. It ranges from 50% to 100% of the gain.
So if I usurped a piece of land and the gain, maybe the rental value I saved, was 100,000 pesos, my fine could be up to 100,000 pesos.
Exactly. With a minimum floor. The law says the fine cannot be less than 15,000 pesos.
And if you can't figure out the gain...
If the value of the gain can't be calculated, maybe you just sat there and didn't really make money, or it's hard to prove the value, the fine is fixed between 40,000 and 100,000 pesos.
I have to be honest, that seems light. Considering we just established that Article 312 requires violence against persons, if I beat someone up to take their land, I just pay a fine. That sounds like I can just buy my way out of a beating.
That's a common reaction. But remember what we said about cumulative penalties. Criminal law is like a layered cake. If the violence you used was severe, say you broke someone's arm, you would be charged with usurpation for the land, and then a physical injuries for the arm.
Ah, okay. So I get a fine for the land, but I go to jail for the broken arm.
Precisely. The usurpation penalty addresses the property crime, which is viewed as economic, hence the fine. The physical injury penalty addresses the violence against the person. The law splits the bill, so to speak.
That makes me feel a little better about the justice system. It's not an either, it's a both hand.
Right. But the fact that usurpation itself is punished by a fine highlights that the law views it primarily as an economic offense against patrimony. It's about restoring the financial balance.
Got it. Now, we've mentioned liability as civil a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I want to clarify the relationship between criminal and civil cases here. This is Section 4 of our outline.
For a very important point.
Can you sue someone and have them arrested at the same time?
The short answer is yes. They can happen simultaneously. The source cites Pitarg versus Cirilla. This case establishes that a criminal action for usurpation is not a bar to a civil action for forcible entry.
They can run on parallel tracks, like
Yep.
two cars on a highway.
Exactly like that. And here's why. The cause of action is different.
Unpack that legalese for us. Cause of action. What does that mean in simple terms?
Think of it as the question you are asking the court to answer. A civil case for forcible entry asks a simple question regarding possession. Who has the right to physically be on this land right now?
Just who gets to stay and who has to go.
Right. The goal is to restore order and maybe get damages for lost time. It's about the now.
Okay. And the criminal case?
The criminal case is the state versus the offender. The question is, did this person break the penal code by using violence to take property? The goal is punishment, the fine we talked about, and social retribution.
So in Pitarg versus Cirilla, what happened? Someone tried to stop the civil case?
Yes, the argument was that because there was a criminal case pending, the civil case should stop. Wait for the result. The court said no.
Why not?
Even if the criminal case gets dismissed, maybe there wasn't enough proof of violence beyond reasonable doubt, the civil case can still proceed.
Because the standard of proof is different, right? I remember this from law shows.
Exactly. In criminal law, you need proof beyond reasonable doubt. That's like 99% certainty. It's a very high bar.
Right.
In civil law, you only need preponderance of evidence, which is just 51%, just tipping the scale slightly in your favor.
So, listener, if the prosecutor says, we can't arrest him, we don't have enough evidence of violence, that doesn't mean you can't sue him to get him off your lawn.
That is a vital distinction. You have two weapons in your arsenal. The police, criminal, and the courts, civil. Don't give up just because one doesn't work.
Okay, we are moving into Section 5, Special Laws. Because, as always, for every general rule in law, there is a very specific exception that changes everything. We established that for Article 312, stealth and strategy are not crimes. They are civil issues.
Right. That's the general rule for private property. If you own a house and someone sneaks in, it's a civil case.
But enter Republic Act Nom 947.
Yes. This law changes the game for a specific type of property, public agricultural land.
Public agricultural land. So we're talking about state-owned lands, grazing lands, forests, things that belong to the nation.
Correct. And also public lands that have been granted to private individuals but still fall under this specific classification. Now, Section 1 of RA 947 penalizes entering or occupying these lands. But look at the means of commission.
I'm looking at the notes here. Means of commission under Rep Act Num 947 are force, intimidation, threat, strategy, or stealth.
There it is. Strategy or stealth, the exact two things that were not criminal before.
Wait a minute. So if I sneak onto a private farm, it's civil.
Yeah.
If I sneak onto government agricultural land, it's a crime.
Yes. Under RA 947, sneaking in is punishable criminally.
Why the double standard? Why does the government get better protection than I do? Why is the state so special?
It's a matter of practicality and public policy. Think about the scale. If you own a house, you can check on it, you have neighbors, you can put up a camera.
Right, I can manage my own property.
But the state holds vast tracts of land, thousands of hectares of forest, mountains, and agricultural zones. It cannot patrol every square inch 247.
It's just too big to watch.
Exactly. If the law didn't punish stealthy entry on public land, people would just slowly encroach on national resources. They'd move their fences in, cut down trees, settle in remote valleys.
And no one would notice for years.
By the time the government noticed, 10 years might have passed. The state would be tied up in endless civil lawsuits. So the law adds the criminal bite to stealth to deter people from usurping the nation's patrimony.
That makes sense. It's about protecting the commons, because the commons can't protect itself. And this law also punishes the mastermind, doesn't it?
It does. It penalizes not just the squatter, the person physically there, but those who induce, instigate, or force others to commit the act.
So this is targeting the syndicates.
Yeah.
The people who organize these things.
Precisely. Often you have powerful individuals who don't want to get their hands dirty. They pay poor families to occupy land, set up shanties, and establish a claim. Then the rich guy comes in later to buy the rights. RA 947 goes after the puppet master, not just the puppet.
That leads us perfectly to the topic of squatting. This is a massive emotional and political word in the Philippines. We hear it on the news constantly.
It is.
The source mentions a presidential decree PD 772- and its evolution. I want to spend some time here because this history is fascinating.
It really is a history of Philippine politics in a nutshell. PD 772 was issued during the martial law era under President Marcos Sr. It specifically punished squatting in urban communities.
Urban, so cities. Metro Manila.
Yes. The philosophy back then was iron fist. The preamble of PD 772 talked about solving the problem of illegal constructions in squatter areas. It viewed squatters as a blight, a nuisance, and often, as the decree claimed, well-to-do individuals exploiting the system.
So it made the act of being a squatter a crime. Just existing there was illegal.
Correct. It criminalized the status of the person. If you were there without a permit, you were a criminal. End of story.
But the notes say PD 772 is repealed.
It is. And this marks a massive shift in social philosophy. It was repealed by Republic Act No. 8368 in 1997, often called the Lena Law.
1997, so post-EDSA, a different vibe.
Very different. The Lena Law decriminalized the act of squatting itself in many contexts. It shifted the focus from punish the criminal to help the underprivileged.
So compassionate, in a way.
It recognized that most squatters aren't evil land grabbers. They are people with nowhere else to go. It turned a criminal issue into a social housing issue.
So it's no longer about arresting them, it's about relocating them.
Exactly. RA 8368 effectively said, we aren't going to put you in jail for being poor and needing a roof.
So squatting isn't a crime anymore.
Well, be careful. That's a dangerous oversimplification. Professional squatting and squatting syndicates are still punished.
Define professional squatters for me. That sounds like an oxymoron.
The law defines them as individuals or groups who occupy lands without the owner's consent and who have sufficient income for legitimate housing, or people who have previously been awarded a government housing lot and sold it to squat again.
The double dippers. The people gaming the system.
Exactly. If you are gaming the system to make money, you are a criminal under RA 7279, which is the Urban Development and Housing Act. But if you are simply a homeless family setting up a shanty, the law treats you as a beneficiary of the state's housing program, not a felon.
That is a huge distinction. It's about intent and ability.
And there's one more twist. Remember, people versus e-saves.
The case in the notes about rural lands.
Yes. Even before PD 772 was repealed, the Supreme Court ruled in Eschaves that PD 772 never applied to pasture lands or rural areas anyway. It was strictly urban.
Okay.
But remember RA 947.
The one about public agricultural land that we just talked about.
Yes, that is not repealed. Squatting on public agricultural land is still a crime under RA 947.
So let me get this straight. If I squat in a city and I'm poor, I'm generally safe from criminal charges, though I can still be evicted.
Correct.
But if I squat on a public grazing land of the province, I'm a criminal.
Yes. The location is everything. Are you squatting on concrete or soil? Are you in a commercial zone or a forest reserve? You practically need a GPS and a lawyer to know if you're committing a crime or just a civil tort.
It really is all about geography.
It is. And that brings us to our final section, which is also about geography, but on a micro scale, Article 313, altering boundaries or landmarks.
This is the shifting fence crime. I feel like this happens everywhere.
Article 313. This is a shorter article, but it has a very interesting conceptual twist.
What are the elements here?
Two main elements. One, there are boundary marks or monuments of towns, provinces, or estates.
So like a fence, a wall, a stone marker?
Exactly. And two, the offender alters them.
Alters. That seems broad.
It is. The source quotes Albert, a legal commentator, saying alter has a general and indefinite meaning. It includes destroying a monument, moving it to a different place, or removing a fence entirely.
So if I kick over the stone marker that separates my lot from yours, that's Article 313.
Yes. You've altered it.
Now, here is the conundrum that jumped out at me in the notes. We spent the first half of this deep dive emphasizing that property crimes theft, robbery, usurpation require intent to gain.
Right. The animus lucrandi. You do it because you want something.
But for Article 313, the notes say, intent to gain is not required. In all caps again.
Textually, that is correct. The law doesn't explicitly say with intent to gain.
This confuses me. If I don't want to gain land, why would I move the fence? And if I move it just to be annoying, like a prank, is that a crime?
This is where legal scholars start dueling with each other. The source mentions a scholar named Guevara. He says, fraudulent intent is not necessary.
So if I move it, I'm guilty, period. Doesn't matter why.
According to Guevara, yes, the act itself is the crime. But then another scholar, Albert, steps in with a scalpel. He argues that a felonious intent to usurp realty must be established as a moral element.
Felonious intent to usurp realty. Translate that for us.
It means we have to look at why you moved it. Did you move it because you wanted to claim the land as your own? That is the intent to usurp.
Give me a scenario where I move it without that intent.
Okay. Imagine you are backing your truck out of your driveway. You're distracted, you hit the gas, and bam, you knock over the concrete boundary marker. You altered it, you moved it. But did you have a felonious intent?
No, I'm just a bad driver. That's an accident.
Exactly. Under Albert's view, that is not a crime. It's an accident. You pay for the repair, but you don't go to jail.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or, what if you honestly believe the fence is in the wrong place? You have a survey from 1950 that says the line is 3 feet to the left. You move the fence to fix it.
I'm trying to correct a mistake in my mind.
Right. You lack the criminal mind, the mens rea. You aren't trying to steal. You're trying to reclaim what you think is yours. That would be a defense.
But if I move the fence 3 feet in your yard at night because I want a bigger garden?
Then you have the intent to usurp. Even if you don't plan to sell the vegetables for money, financial gain, you have the intent to appropriate the dominion of the land. That is the moral element Albert is talking about.
It's fascinating that we have to read between the lines of the statute to find the soul of the crime.
That's statutory construction for you. You can't just read the words, you have to understand the purpose. And the purpose is to protect the integrity of property lines so that society remains orderly.
And the penalty for this fence shifting?
Arresto menor, which is very short imprisonment, 1 to 30 days, or a fine not exceeding 20,000 pesos, or both.
So a slap on the wrist compared to some other crimes, but still a criminal record.
Exactly. Don't move the monuments.
Wow. We have covered a lot of ground, pun intended. We've gone from violent home invasions to sneaky squatters to shifting fences.
It's a dense legal landscape.
So let's recap the big takeaways for our listener. Let's try to nail them down.
Sure, let's do it. 1, usurpation, Art 312, is distinct from theft robbery because it involves real property, immovable things.
Okay, number 2.
The defining element of criminal usurpation is violence or intimidation against persons. Breaking a lock is force upon things, and that's not enough for this specific crime.
Right, so that's usually just civil forcible entry.
Exactly. 3, stealth and strategy also means civil liability only, unless...
Number 4.
Unless you are on public agricultural land under RA 947, where stealth is definitely a crime because the state can't watch everything.
Okay, 5.
You cannot usurp your own land, but you can commit grave coercion if you violently take it back. Don't use a baseball bat, use a lawyer.
And the last one?
6, altering boundaries, Art 313, is a crime even without clear financial profit, provided there is an intent to claim the land as your own.
A perfect summary. It really highlights how the law tries to balance property rights with public order. It protects your land, but it protects people from violence even more.
That's the crucial tension. And that leads me to a final thought, a provocative thought, if you will, for the listener to chew on.
Lay it on us.
We spent a lot of time on the violence against persons versus violence against things distinction. Think about what that says about our legal values.
Okay.
You can smash a door, destroy a fence, and sneak into a house, and the criminal law, under Art 312, steps back and says, that's a civil matter. But if you push a person, it becomes a crime.
Right.
It suggests that the law, at least in this chapter, prioritizes physical safety over the sanctity of property. It would rather you lose possession of your house for a few months while you sue in civil court than have a violent confrontation trying to stop a usurper.
So it's a de-escalation strategy written into the law.
It effectively tells property owners, don't fight, litigate, but then look at the exception for the state's agricultural land.
Where stealth is a crime.
There, even stealth is a crime. Why? Does the state value its own property more than it values your physical safety? Or does it just acknowledge that the state can't be everywhere, so it needs a harsher deterrent? It's a question of who the law is really designed to protect, the individual citizen or the system itself.
That is something to think about next time you look at your backyard fence. Is it just a piece of wood? Or is it a line drawn by centuries of legal philosophy? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the complex, sometimes contradictory, but always important world of property crimes.
It's been a pleasure. Keep questioning the boundaries.
See you on the next deep dive.
Welcome to the debate.
It's good to be here.
If I walk up to you on the street and snatch a Rolex off your wrist, that is a clear-cut crime. It's theft. It involves what lawyers call asportation, the taking and moving of an object. But the legal philosophy, it changes completely when we talk about stealing something you can't move. How do you steal a hectare of a rice paddy or a residential lot?
You can't exactly put it in your pocket.
No, you don't take it, you occupy it. And that shift in language right there, from taking to occupying, it creates a fascinating and, I would argue, a pretty dangerous gray area in the law.
Precisely. Today, we are dissecting the criminality of land seizure, specifically focusing on Article 312 of the Revised Penal Code. That's usurpation of real property, and Article 313, which is altering boundaries.
And the central question we are really wrestling with is this. Does the law's obsession with violence against persons actually create a loophole for land grabbers? I mean, does the law essentially tell criminals it's okay to steal land, just, be sneaky about it?
I am the advocate. I'm going to argue for a strict statutory interpretation. The law is designed to be narrow for a very good reason, to stop every argument over a fence line from turning into a prison sentence. Criminal usurpation has to remain limited to cases involving violence against people.
And I am the dissenter. I'll be arguing that this strict definition, it ignores the reality of dispossession. We're going to look at how strategy and stealth can allow bad actors to dodge criminal liability. And we'll also look at the deep confusion around intent when it comes to just moving property boundaries.
Okay, so let's start by setting the stage with the actual statute. Article 312 of the Revised Penal Code is a specific tool. It is not a blunt instrument. It punishes a person who takes possession of real property belonging to another only if they use violence against or intimidation of persons.
And right there, we hit the first hurdle.
Well, I don't see it as a hurdle. It's a filter. The insight here, the key takeaway for our listeners, is that the law deliberately separates force upon things from violence against people. If I kick down your gate, smash your padlock, or, break a window to enter your land, that is force upon things. That makes me aggressive, sure, and it makes me civilly liable for damages, maybe even liable for malicious mischief, but it does not make me a criminal usurper under Article 312.
Which sounds incredibly counterintuitive to the average landowner. I mean, if I come home and my gate is smashed and you're sitting on my porch, I feel like a crime has been committed against my property.
A wrong has been committed, certainly, but this distinction is absolutely vital for the health of the legal system. If we criminalized every unauthorized entry where a lock was broken, our penal system would just collapse under the weight of civil property disputes. I mean, imagine two neighbors fighting over an easement. One breaks a latch to walk through. Do we really send him to prison? The law says no. The law reserves the heavy hand of criminal punishment and the associated fines based on the value of the gain only for acts that threaten human safety.
That sounds logical in a vacuum, I'll grant you that. We don't want to jail everyone who has a boundary dispute. But in practice, this strict construction, it creates a perverse incentive structure. By insisting on violence against persons, the law effectively creates what I call the stealth loophole.
I think loophole is a very strong word.
I think it's accurate. My position is that the jurisprudence, specifically in cases like People versus Dima Kuntatak, teaches the land grabbers a masterclass innovation. If a squatter waits for you to leave for work, slips in through an open window, or, uses a duplicate key and then locks the door behind them, they have committed no crime under Article 312. They used strategy, not violence.
They haven't committed usurpation. That doesn't mean they're legally in the clear.
But look at the result. The victim suffers the exact same loss. Their property's gone, they are homeless or landless. And yet the sneaky usurper faces only a civil lawsuit. And do you know how long a forcible entry case can take? Years. Meanwhile, the brash usurper who maybe pushed someone out of the way faces criminal charges immediately. The law privileges the cunning over the aggressive.
It privileges peace. The law is saying, if you are going to dispute possession, do not hurt anyone. It disincentivizes violence.
Or it incentivizes stealthy theft. But let's dig into that stealth loophole a little deeper, because the timeline required by the law gets genuinely absurd when you apply it to real-world interactions. I want to talk about the after-entry defense.
This is a point that often confuses laypeople, but legally, it's all about the elements of the crime.
It's about chronology trumping justice. Let me paint a picture. Suppose I sneak onto your land while you are on vacation. Pure stealth, no violence. I move my furniture in, I change the locks. A week later, you come home. You try to enter your own house. Now that I am already inside, I punch you in the face and chase you off with a machete. Under the strict reading of Article 312 and under the precedent of Dimmick attack, I am not guilty of usurpation.
And legally speaking, that is correct.
How can you defend that with a straight face? I stole your land and I used a machete to keep it.
Because we have to look at when the act happened. The law requires that violence or intimidation be the means used to occupy the property. In your scenario, the occupation, the taking itself, was done peacefully. The violence happened after you were already in possession.
So the violence was just, what, a separate incident?
Exactly. As the legal commentator Reyes notes, if the violence takes place after entry to maintain possession, you cannot charge usurpation because the usurpation itself, the act of taking, was already complete. Now, don't get me wrong, you're still a criminal. You would be charged with physical injuries or perhaps grave coercion for the punch and the threat, but you cannot charge usurpation because the entry was stealthy.
But this splits hairs to a degree that just defies common sense. Look at People versus Layson. In that case, there was open defiance of a writ of execution. The accused refused to leave, then presumably postured against the authorities. But the court said not usurpation because the initial possession wasn't secured by force. It forces the prosecutor to thread this tiny needle. If they charge usurpation, the defense just says, but I entered quietly on Tuesday, I only threatened you on Wednesday, and then the case is dismissed.
And that is why we have lawyers, to ensure the correct charge is filed. If you charge usurpation when the facts actually support grave coercion, that is a failure of the prosecution, not the law. The law demands precision. You can't just charge a man for a crime he didn't strictly commit just because he committed a different one later.
But consider the victim's perspective. It forces them to navigate a maze of technicalities just to get their property back. And speaking of technicalities that hurt the victim, let's talk about the owner defense. This is a principle from U.S. versus Fuster.
A classic case, yes, and one that's fundamental to property rights.
Okay. So, this case established that Article 312 doesn't apply if the defendant can prove they are the actual owner of the land. So, let's paint a picture. I am a landlord. I have a tenant who is a few months late on rent. The legal way to handle this is an eviction suit. But, based on Fuster, I can just go over there, kick the door down, drag the tenant out by the collar, and throw their stuff on the street. As long as I can prove the title is mine, I am not guilty of usurpation.
You are partially correct, but you are missing the nuance. You are not guilty of usurpation because the element, property belonging to another, is missing. You cannot usurp your own land. That's a logical impossibility.
But that sounds like sanctioned vigilante justice. Are you telling me the law allows landlords to use violence?
No, absolutely not. And this is where the advocate for the system has to be very clear. The law simply shifts the charge. If an owner uses violence to recover their property, they are liable for grave coercion.
Why does the distinction even matter? You go to jail either way.
It matters immensely. It matters for the penalty structure and for the very nature of the crime. Usurpation is a crime against property. The penalty is often a fine based on the value of the gain. Grave coercion is a crime against personal liberty. The penalty involves prison correctional, actual prison time. So, paradoxically, the law might punish the violent owner more severely than the usurper because it views the violation of personal liberty as a greater sin than the violation of property rights.
That is a fair point on the penalties. If the prison time is real, that's a deterrent. But procedurally, it creates a nightmare. It turns a criminal trial about violence into a civil trial about ownership. Before the judge can decide if I'm a criminal for kicking you out, they have to decide who actually owns the land to see which crime even fits. It drags the criminal court right into the quagmire of land disputes, which is exactly what you said strict construction was supposed to avoid.
It's unavoidable. If ownership is a defense, the court must hear it. But I do want to pivot back to your claim that stealth is always a free pass. That isn't entirely true. We have to distinguish private land from public land.
You're referring to Republic Act No. 94-7.
Correct. The state treats its own property differently. Under RA 94-7, if you enter public agricultural land, the law punishes not just violence, but also entry by threat, strategy, or stealth.
Okay, so let me get this straight. If I use stealth to sneak onto a government rice paddy, I'm a criminal. I go to jail. But if I use that same stealth to sneak onto your private backyard, I'm merely a civil liability. I just get sued.
Yes, that is the current legal framework.
That feels like a massive double standard. Why is the state's property more sacred than a private citizen's home?
It's not about sanctity. It's about resources and scope. The state cannot watch every single hectare of public forest or agricultural land. It is an absentee landlord by definition. It doesn't have neighbors watching the fence line. So to deter squatters, the law casts a wider net. It criminalizes stealth because the state is uniquely vulnerable to it. Private owners, on the other hand, are expected to be vigilant. You are supposed to watch your own fence. If you let someone sneak in, the law tells you to use the civil courts, not the police, because, well, you should have been paying attention.
It assumes a level of vigilance that just isn't always possible. What if I'm an OFW working abroad? What if I'm sick? It feels like the law protects the powerful state while leaving the private rural landowner to fend for themselves against cunning squatters. It creates a fragmented justice system.
It creates a system that allocates police power where it is most needed, but we're focusing heavily on the taking of land. I want to shift gears to the altering of land, because Article 313, altering boundaries or landmarks, offers a completely different philosophical puzzle.
This is the part of the code that scares me the most, honestly.
Scares you? It's about boundary stones.
It's about intent, or more accurately, the potential lack thereof.
Okay, let's explain. Article 313 punishes anyone who alters boundary marks, monuments, trees, stones of towns, provinces, or estates. My position is that Article 313 is a crime of strict liability regarding the act itself. The elements are simple. There are boundary marks, and the offender altered them. Unlike usurpation, the text of the law does not explicitly require intent to gain.
And that is exactly why it's terrifying. Altering is vague. As the legal commentator Albert notes, altering can mean removing a fence or even just moving a stone marker. If we don't require intent to gain or intent to steal, then we risk criminalizing accidents.
How so?
Imagine a farmer plowing his field. He accidentally knocks over a stone marker. Or imagine a gardener who pulls up a rotting wooden fence post to replace it, and he moves it 3 inches to the left. Under your strict reading, they have altered a boundary. They are criminals.
Well, accident is always a defense in criminal law, a lack of negligence or intent to do the act itself. But if you intentionally move the marker, yes, you are liable, and I would argue you should be.
Even if I didn't want to steal the land?
Yes, because the law protects the integrity of the boundary itself. Think about it. Boundaries are the only thing separating your property from mine or one town from the next. If people start moving them, even innocently, it creates chaos. It erases the official record. The law punishes the act of creating that chaos, regardless of whether you wanted to get rich doing it.
But there is a massive conflict in the legal commentary here, and it proves that this isn't settled. You have Guevara, who says fraudulent intent is not necessary. He sides with you. But then you have Albert, another legal heavyweight, who argues that a felonious intent to usurp realty must be established.
And I side with Guevara. The act is the danger.
I side with Albert. Because without intent, you are punishing a state of mind that isn't criminal. Let's say I move a fence because I honestly, sincerely believe it's in the wrong place. I think that 3 feet of land is mine. I am not trying to steal. I'm trying to reclaim what's mine. I lack the intent to usurp because in my mind, I already own it.
If you take the law into your own hands to move an official monument based on a hunch, you are subverting the authority of the survey. You go to court to fix a boundary, you don't go out with a shovel.
But Article 313 covers any other marks. It's not just official government monuments. It could be a pile of rocks we agreed on 10 years ago, a wooden stake, a tree. If I cut down that tree, am I a felon? Without the requirement of intent to steal, we are punishing people for gardening or for honestly disputing a boundary line. It uses the threat of prison to solve what should be a survey dispute.
It uses the threat of prison to ensure people respect the lines that keep society organized. If you allow people to move boundaries based on their honest belief, every single land grabber will just claim, oh, I honestly thought the line was over there. It would make the law unenforceable. Strict liability forces everyone to leave the markers alone.
It forces everyone to live in fear that moving a rock could land them a criminal record. That just seems disproportionate.
It seems necessary.
We're coming to the end of our time, but I think this discussion really highlights that property law isn't just about who owns what. It's about how we behave.
I agree, and I think this discussion clarifies why these property crimes are so narrowly defined. The criminal court cannot and should not be the venue for every land dispute. For usurpation, the threshold is clear. Violence against persons. If you cross that line into hurting people, you are a criminal. If you just move in quietly or argue over a fence, you are a civil problem. And that distinction, while I know it can be frustrating to the victim in the moment, is what keeps the justice system from getting clogged with neighbors arguing over inches of soil.
Precise, create a landscape where the stealthy usurper is privileged. The law essentially tells bad actors, don't be violent, just be quick and quiet. If you're smart enough to steal without raising a fist, the state won't touch you. And with Article 313, we see a law that's still struggling to decide if it punishes the physical act of moving a rock or the mental intent to steal the land.
It is the fine line between a tort and a crime.
And it's a line every property owner should understand, because depending on whether a squatter kicks down your door or simply picks the lock, your path to justice looks very, very different.
Indeed. Thank you for listening to The Debate.
Until next time.